Hello, friend. Tonight, if anxiety feels close, if worry has been your companion through the day, if fear whispers in the corners of your mind as you prepare for sleep, there is a place for you to rest. Not a physical place, though you lie in your bed right now, but a shelter that exists beyond walls and roofs, a refuge that has stood firm for thousands of years, waiting for moments exactly like this one. Tonight, we turn to Psalm 91, an ancient song of protection, a promise spoken into darkness, a hand extended toward anyone who feels afraid. You don't need to do anything but listen. You don't need to memorize verses or analyze structure or prove you understand. You simply need to be here, breathing, present, allowing these words to wash over you like water over stone, slowly, persistently, wearing away the sharp edges of fear until something softer remains. This psalm was written for you, even though it was penned millennia ago by hands that never knew your name. It was written for every person who has ever lain awake wondering if tomorrow will be kind, for everyone who carries the weight of uncertainty, for all who need reminding that they are not as alone as the darkness suggests. The psalm begins with a declaration, not a question. Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. Notice it doesn't say, might rest, or could possibly rest. It says, will rest. This is certainty offered to the uncertain, stability extended to those who feel unsteady. But what does it mean to dwell in the shelter of the Most High? This isn't about geography or architecture. The Hebrew word for dwell here suggests more than visiting. It means to sit down, to remain, to make your home in a place. It's the difference between passing through and settling in. Throughout history, people have understood shelter as one of the most basic human needs. In ancient times, shelter meant survival, a place protected from weather, from wild animals, from enemies. The psalmist understands this primal need and elevates it, suggesting that the ultimate shelter isn't made of stone or wood, but of the presence of God Himself. And here you are tonight, perhaps feeling exposed to storms you cannot control, to threats you cannot name, to futures you cannot predict. The psalm invites you into a different kind of architecture, one built not with human hands, but with divine promise. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. Notice the personal nature of this statement, not God is a refuge, as if speaking about something distant and theoretical, but my refuge, my fortress, my God. This is relationship language, intimate language. The writer isn't reciting theology, they're describing lived experience, declaring what they have found to be true in their own life. And they're doing so in the first person, as if teaching you not just what to believe, but what to say, giving you words when your own words fail. In the ancient Near East, a fortress was a place of last resort, where people fled when danger overwhelmed them. These weren't comfortable places. They were utilitarian, stark, designed for one purpose only, protection. And yet the psalm links fortress with refuge, that warmer word suggesting not just safety but comfort, not just walls, but welcome. God, the psalm suggests, is both the impregnable fortress that nothing can breach and the warm refuge that soothes the frightened heart. Both strength and tenderness exist in the same place. Surely He will save you from the fowler's snare and from the deadly pestilence. Here the psalm becomes specific, naming particular threats. The fowler's snare refers to traps set by birdcatchers, hidden dangers designed to capture the unsuspecting. Perhaps you know something about hidden traps, about anxieties that spring up suddenly, catching you off guard when you thought you were safe. The ancient Israelites would have understood this image immediately. They watched fowlers work, saw how birds flew freely one moment and were captured the next, innocent victims of invisible danger. Your anxiety might feel like that too, a trap you didn't see coming, a net that tightens the more you struggle. And then, the deadly pestilence, the plague, disease that spreads through communities leaving devastation in its wake. In a world before modern medicine, pestilence was one of the most feared realities. It couldn't be fought with swords or defended against with walls. It moved invisibly, struck randomly, showed no mercy. The psalmist doesn't pretend these threats don't exist. The psalm never says, "Don't worry, nothing bad will happen." Instead it says, even in the presence of real danger, even when genuine threats surround you, there is one who will save you. The Hebrew word translated as save here can also mean deliver or snatch away. It's a forceful word, suggesting active intervention, not passive observation. This isn't a God who watches from a distance, sympathetically noting your struggle. This is a God who reaches into the trap, who breaks the snare, who pulls you free from what seeks to hold you captive. Think about that for a moment. Whatever anxiety grips you tonight, whatever fear has its hooks in you, the psalm declares that God's grip is stronger. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. Now the imagery shifts, becomes almost impossibly tender. The God who is fortress and stronghold is also a bird, protective, maternal, gathering the vulnerable beneath soft wings. This isn't the only place in Scripture where God is compared to a bird. Jesus himself uses similar language when he weeps over Jerusalem, longing to gather the people as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. There's something profound here about the nature of divine protection, how it combines power and gentleness, how the same God who is mighty enough to be a fortress is also gentle enough to offer the warmth of feathers. Have you ever watched a mother bird with her young? How she spreads her wings to create a canopy of safety, how the chicks nestle underneath without fear, trusting completely in her presence. This is the image offered to you tonight. Whatever you face, however large or small your anxieties may be, you are invited to rest like a chick under wing, hidden, warm, safe. The world may rage outside, storms may come, predators may circle, but under the wing there is shelter. His faithfulness will be your shield and rampart. Faithfulness here is more than just keeping promises, though it includes that. The Hebrew word suggests steadiness, reliability, trustworthiness that has been tested over time and proven true. A shield in ancient warfare was a soldier's primary defense, held between the warrior and incoming weapons, absorbing blows meant for flesh. A rampart was part of a city's defensive walls, a raised barrier giving advantage to defenders. Both protect, but in different ways. The shield is mobile, personal, moving with you. The rampart is fixed, part of a larger structure of safety. God's faithfulness, the psalm says, functions as both. It moves with you, this personal shield deflecting the arrows of doubt and fear that fly toward your heart. And it stands firm, this immovable rampart, built not on sand, but on the bedrock of divine character. When everything else shifts, when circumstances change and ground feels unsteady beneath your feet, God's faithfulness remains. It was there yesterday. It is here tonight. It will be there tomorrow. This isn't something you have to generate or maintain through your own effort. It exists independent of your feelings, your faith level, your performance. It simply is. You will not fear the terror of night, nor the arrow that flies by day. Fear is directly addressed now, named and confronted. Notice the psalm doesn't say you shouldn't fear, as if fear itself is a moral failing. It says you will not fear, a statement about what becomes possible in the shelter, under the wing, behind the shield. And it acknowledges that threats come at all hours. Terror visits at night, when darkness amplifies every worry, when the mind races and sleep feels impossible. Arrows fly by day when you're trying to function, trying to work and live and interact while danger feels imminent. Night terrors and daytime arrows, these aren't metaphors to ancient listeners. They're literal descriptions of life in a violent world, where attacks could come at any hour. But to you tonight, they might mean something different. The terror of night might be the 3 a.m. panic attack, the racing thoughts, the catastrophic scenarios your mind constructs in darkness. The arrow that flies by day might be the sudden trigger, the unexpected news, the bill you can't pay, the diagnosis that changes everything, the relationship that fractures, the job that disappears. The psalm doesn't promise immunity from hardship. It doesn't say arrows won't fly or that terror won't exist. It says, you will not fear them, which is different, profoundly different. This is about what happens inside you, not just what happens around you. In the shelter, under the wing, protected by faithfulness, fear loses its power, not because circumstances change, but because your position changes. You're no longer facing threats alone. You're no longer defenseless. You're hidden in a place fear cannot reach, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the plague that destroys at midday. Again, specific threats are named. Pestilence and plague, disease and death, these realities that humans have faced in every generation. In the ancient world, illness could sweep through communities with devastating speed. There were no antibiotics, no vaccines, no emergency rooms. When plague came, people died. The psalmist knows this. Everyone listening to this psalm for the first time knew this. And still the declaration stands, you will not fear. Perhaps for you, the plague isn't literal disease, but something else that destroys. Perhaps it's depression that stalks through your days, anxiety that destroys your peace, addiction that haunts your nights, trauma that shadows your middays. The psalm doesn't specify exactly what form destruction takes. It simply acknowledges that destructive forces exist, and then declares that in God's shelter, you need not fear them. Not because they're not real, not because they don't have power, but because something more powerful holds you. 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. This is a startling statement, almost disturbing in its specificity. 1,000 falling at your side, 10,000 at your right hand. These are massive numbers, suggesting catastrophe on an enormous scale. And the promise isn't that catastrophe won't happen. It's that even in the midst of widespread destruction, even when it seems like everyone around you is falling, you will remain standing. This is difficult territory, isn't it? Because we all know people who prayed, who trusted, who sought shelter in God, and still faced terrible things. We all know faithful people who fell despite their faith. So what do we do with this promise? How do we hold it honestly, without either dismissing it as naive optimism or clinging to it as a magical guarantee of physical safety? Perhaps the key is understanding what "come near you" means. In Hebrew, the phrase suggests not just physical proximity, but the ability to truly harm, to touch what matters most. There's a difference between experiencing difficulty and being destroyed by it, between facing loss and losing yourself, between enduring pain and being defined by it. The psalm might be saying something deeper than, you'll never experience hardship. It might be saying, even in hardship, even if the worst comes, your essential self, your soul, the part of you that dwells in God's shelter, that part cannot be touched by destruction. Think of Job, that ancient figure who lost everything. His children died, his wealth vanished, his health collapsed. His wife told him to curse God and die. By any measure, catastrophe fell at his side, at his right hand, all around him. And yet, in some fundamental way, it did not come near him. His faith wavered, he questioned, he raged, but he was never separated from God. The shelter held even when everything else collapsed. You will only observe with your eyes and see the punishment of the wicked. This line troubles many readers. It sounds almost vindictive, as if the righteous are meant to take pleasure in watching others suffer. But perhaps that's not the point. Perhaps this is simply acknowledging reality, that consequences exist, that actions have results, that the world operates according to certain principles. You will observe, the psalm says, not you will gloat, but simply you will see. There's something here about perspective, about the ability to witness suffering without being consumed by it, to see destruction without being destroyed, to observe consequences without falling into them yourself. When you're in the shelter, you have a different vantage point. You can see clearly. You can understand what's happening without being swept away by it. The wicked here likely doesn't mean people who are evil, but rather those who reject shelter, who insist on facing life's storms alone, who refuse the refuge offered. And haven't we all been there? Haven't we all had moments where we rejected help, pushed away comfort, insisted on handling everything ourselves? The punishment of the wicked might simply be the natural result of trying to stand in your own strength against forces too great for any human to bear. And from inside the shelter, you can see that clearly, not with judgment, but with understanding, perhaps even with compassion for those still outside, still refusing to come in from the storm. If you say, "The Lord is my refuge," and you make the Most High your dwelling, this is a conditional statement, one of the few in the psalm. If you say, "If you make," this suggests choice, response, participation. The shelter exists whether you enter it or not. The wings are spread whether you nestle beneath them or not. The protection is offered whether you accept it or not. But to experience it, you must say yes. You must make that declaration. The Lord is my refuge. You must choose to dwell there rather than camping outside. This isn't about earning protection through the right words or correct belief. It's about positioning yourself to receive what's already being offered. If you stand outside a building during a rainstorm, you'll get wet, even if the building has a perfectly good roof. The roof exists, the shelter is real, but you must step inside. Tonight, as you listen to these words, as sleep slowly approaches, you're being invited inside. The door is open. The wings are spread. The question is whether you'll accept the invitation. No harm will overtake you. No disaster will come near your tent. Your tent, your dwelling place, the sacred space of your life. In the ancient nomadic world, tents were everything. They were home, sanctuary, the center of family life. When the psalm speaks of your tent, it's speaking about what matters most to you, the inner sanctum of your existence. And the promise is that in that space, disaster will not come near. Again, this requires careful understanding. Difficulty will come, challenges will arrive. Life will present its full range of experiences, both joyful and painful. But disaster, the kind that fundamentally destroys, that obliterates hope, that separates you from God, that disaster will not reach your tent. Your essential dwelling place, your soul's home, remains untouched. You might face fire, but you won't be consumed. You might walk through flood, but you won't drown. The core of who you are, held in God's hands, stays safe. For he will command his angels concerning you, to guard you in all your ways. Angels now enter the psalm, these mysterious beings who serve as messengers and protectors. The Hebrew word for angels simply means messengers, and throughout Scripture they appear in moments of danger, bringing protection, guidance, intervention. Here they're commanded, dispatched specifically for you, assigned to guard you in all your ways. Not some of your ways, not just when you're being good or faithful or strong. All your ways. Every path you walk, every choice you make, every road you travel, angels accompany you. This is comprehensive protection, not partial. It covers your public life and your private struggles. It extends to your brightest days and your darkest nights. Wherever you go, however you get there, guardians have been assigned. There's something profound here about value, about worth, about how seriously God takes your life. You matter enough that heaven's resources are deployed on your behalf. You're important enough that angels receive commands concerning you, not because you've earned it or deserve it, but simply because you are loved, because you are God's child, because the Creator refuses to leave you unprotected. They will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. This is tenderness itself. Not just protection from major catastrophes, but care for minor hurts, concern even for your foot hitting a stone. In ancient Palestine, roads were rocky, uneven, treacherous. Striking your foot against a stone was common, often painful, sometimes debilitating. And God cares even about this, even about the small injuries, the minor setbacks, the everyday difficulties. Your anxiety tonight might not be about huge catastrophes. It might be about smaller things, accumulated worries, the 1,000 small stones in your path that threaten to trip you. Bills and relationships and health concerns and work stress and family dynamics and everything else that makes life feel overwhelming. The psalm says angels lift you up even over these. Nothing is too small for divine concern. No worry is too minor to bring into the shelter. Jesus himself references this passage during his temptation in the wilderness. The devil quotes these very verses, suggesting Jesus throw himself from the temple to prove God's protection. And Jesus responds by saying we shouldn't test God. This is an important counterpoint to the psalm. The protection promised here isn't an invitation to recklessness, to intentionally courting danger because you assume you're invincible. It's a promise for when you're walking faithfully, doing what you're called to do, and danger comes anyway. The difference is crucial. Faith isn't about presumption, about forcing God's hand through risky behavior. Faith is about trust, about walking carefully but without paralyzing fear, about living fully while knowing you're held, about engaging life's challenges without being consumed by anxiety over outcomes you can't control. The angels don't lift up the one who deliberately jumps off cliffs. They lift up the one who walks faithfully and encounters stones in the path. You will tread on the lion and the cobra. You will trample the great lion and the serpent. The imagery becomes fierce now, almost violent. Lion and cobra, the most dangerous predators of the ancient world. The great lion, mature and powerful, at the height of its strength. The serpent, crafty and venomous, associated with evil itself since Eden. And you, the psalm says, will tread on them, will trample them. This isn't suggesting you go hunting for lions or playing with cobras. It's declaring that when these threats appear in your path, when you encounter the predatory forces that seek to devour or poison you, you will have power over them. Not your own power, but power given to you. Authority delegated from the shelter, strength borrowed from the Almighty. The same God who provides wings of tenderness also provides feet that can crush serpents. There's something here about the full range of God's protection. Sometimes you need to be hidden, sheltered, covered. Other times you need to be empowered, strengthened, made fierce. Sometimes the appropriate response to threat is to run to shelter. Other times it's to stand your ground and resist. The psalm holds both realities. You are both chick under wing and warrior with authority. Both vulnerable one seeking refuge and powerful one treading on enemies. The shelter provides whatever you need in each moment. For many people struggling with anxiety, this promise of power over predatory forces feels distant, impossible. Anxiety itself feels like the lion, the cobra, the thing that stalks and strikes and leaves you helpless. How do you tread on anxiety when it seems to have its jaws around your throat? Perhaps the first step is simply coming into the shelter, acknowledging you can't fight this. Alone, accepting protection. And then, gradually, from within that safety, you begin to notice something. The lion is outside the shelter. The cobra cannot penetrate the refuge. They're still there, still dangerous, but they no longer have access to you. And from that protected place, you begin to find courage. Not because you've suddenly become brave on your own, but because you're borrowing courage from the one who shelters you. The anxiety is still real, the threat still exists, but you're no longer facing it alone and defenseless. You're standing on solid ground, your feet planted on the faithfulness of God, and from that position, you can face what previously paralyzed you. You can tread on the lion, you can trample the serpent, not in your strength, but in his. The psalm now shifts into direct divine speech, as if God himself begins to speak, responding to everything that's been declared so far. Because he loves me, says the Lord, I will rescue him. I will protect him, for he acknowledges my name. This is the reason, the foundation beneath all the promises. Love. Not your love for God, though that's mentioned, but God's recognition of your love, God's response to your turning toward him. Because you love, because you acknowledge the divine name, because you've made that choice to say, "You are my refuge." Rescue and protection follow. The Hebrew word for rescue here is powerful. It means to set securely on high, to lift to an inaccessible place, to put beyond reach of danger. When someone is drowning, you don't just tell them to swim harder. You pull them from the water, set them on solid ground, lift them to safety. This is what God promises to do. Whatever is pulling you under tonight, whatever anxiety threatens to drown you, God's response is to lift you out, to set you securely beyond its reach. And protection, that word appears again, emphasizing divine commitment to your safety. The repetition matters. Scripture often repeats what it most wants us to hear, what we most need to remember. God will rescue, and God will protect. Both actions, both promises, both certainties offered to the one who loves, who acknowledges, who seeks shelter. To acknowledge God's name in ancient Hebrew thought wasn't just about knowing a word. A name represented character, nature, essence. To acknowledge God's name was to recognize who God truly is, to call upon that character, to align yourself with that nature. When you cry out in your anxiety, when you turn toward God in your fear, you're acknowledging the name. You're saying, "You are who Scripture says you are. You are refuge and fortress. You are faithful and true, and I need you." And that acknowledgement, that turning, triggers divine response. Rescue, protection. He will call on me, and I will answer him. This is relationship language, conversational intimacy. Not a distant deity who might be too busy to notice, but a present God who answers when called. The Hebrew word for answer suggests more than just responding. It implies acting on behalf of, delivering, saving. When you call, God doesn't just say, "I hear you." God moves toward you, intervenes for you, acts in your situation. Think about what it means that God waits for your call. Not because God is unaware of your need before you voice it. God knows your anxiety before you name it, sees your fear before you express it. But calling is part of relationship. It's how you move from isolation to connection, from trying to handle everything alone to accepting help. When you call, you're admitting need. You're acknowledging you can't do this by yourself. And that admission, that humility, opens the door for divine action. How many nights have you lain awake carrying burdens, wrestling with worries, trapped in anxious thought spirals, all while telling yourself you should be strong enough to handle it? How many times has pride or shame or just sheer exhaustion kept you from calling out? The psalm says, "Call, just call. Voice it. Whisper it into the darkness. Say, 'I need help. I'm afraid. I can't do this alone.'" And God answers, not with judgment or disappointment, but with presence, with action, with intervention. I will be with him in trouble. Notice God doesn't say, "I will keep him from trouble." Trouble comes. Difficulty arrives. Life includes valleys and shadows and hard places. But in those places, God promises presence. I will be with him. Not above him looking down sympathetically. Not beside him offering useless platitudes. With him, in the trouble, sharing the space, bearing the weight. This is the incarnational promise, the same truth that led God to enter human experience in Jesus, to walk dusty roads and feel hunger and know exhaustion and face temptation and ultimately die. God doesn't remain distant from human suffering. God enters it, inhabits it, transforms it from the inside. Your trouble tonight, whatever form it takes, is not a place God refuses to go. It's exactly where God promises to be, with you, in it, present. In Hebrew, the word for with is rich with meaning. It suggests companionship, alliance, being on someone's side. When God says, "I will be with you in trouble," it's a declaration of solidarity, of loyalty, of committed presence. You're not alone in this valley. You have a companion who knows the way through, who has walked these paths before, who will not leave you or abandon you, regardless of how dark it gets or how long the journey takes. I will deliver him and honour him. Deliverance, that ancient hope, that fundamental human longing to be set free from whatever binds or threatens or oppresses. The Hebrew word suggests pulling out, rescuing from danger, bringing to safety. But notice the pairing with honour. Not just rescue, but elevation. Not just survival, but dignity. Not just making it through, but emerging with something gained, not just lost. This is countercultural in a world that often sees suffering as shameful, difficulty as sign of failure, struggle as something to hide. God's promise is different. You will be delivered, yes, but also honoured. Your endurance matters. Your faith in the midst of fear counts for something. The fact that you're still here, still breathing, still seeking, still hoping despite everything, that deserves honour. And God sees it, acknowledges it, elevates it. Perhaps you feel anything but honourable tonight. Perhaps anxiety has left you feeling small, weak, broken. Perhaps you judge yourself for not being stronger, for not having more faith, for struggling with what seems to come easily to others. The psalm says God sees differently. Where you see weakness, God sees someone calling out, someone acknowledging need, someone loving enough to seek shelter. And that, in God's eyes, is honourable. That deserves recognition. That merits being lifted up. With long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. Long life, not just quantity of days, but quality, satisfaction, fullness. The Hebrew word for satisfy suggests being filled to contentment, having enough, experiencing sufficiency. This isn't about living to a certain age. It's about experiencing life deeply, fully, richly, however long it lasts. It's about satisfaction, that deep soul-level sense of, it is enough, I have been filled, I have known goodness. And then salvation, that ultimate deliverance, that final rescue, that complete freedom. God promises to show salvation, to make it visible, to demonstrate it in ways that can be seen and experienced. Salvation in Hebrew thought isn't just about the afterlife, though it includes that. It's about wholeness, restoration, being made complete, experiencing the fullness of what God intended for human life. It's shalom, that rich word meaning peace, completeness, welfare, harmony, everything working as it should. Tonight you might feel far from satisfaction, distant from any sense of salvation. Anxiety steals satisfaction, robs peace, fragments wholeness. But the psalm declares that God's intention for you is different. Long life filled with satisfaction, visible salvation, peace that runs deep, wholeness that holds. This is where the journey leads, even if you can't see it from where you currently stand. This is the destination toward which you're being guided, even when the path feels impossible to navigate. Let's pause here and consider the entire psalm as a whole, this ancient song that has comforted countless people across millennia. It begins with an invitation to dwell in shelter, and ends with a promise of satisfaction and salvation. Between those bookends, it names specific fears, acknowledges real dangers, and declares divine protection over and over in different words, different images, different promises. It's as if the psalmist knows that once isn't enough, that frightened people need to hear truth multiple times, in multiple ways, before it begins to penetrate the fog of anxiety. The psalm understands something about fear that modern psychology is only beginning to articulate fully. Fear isn't primarily rational. You can know logically that you're safe and still feel terrified. You can understand statistically that your worry is unlikely to materialize and still be consumed by it. Anxiety doesn't respond well to logical argument. It needs something else. It needs presence. It needs promises. It needs repetition. It needs images that engage not just the mind, but the heart and body. This is why the psalm gives us wings and shields, fortresses and tents, angels and authority over serpents. These aren't random metaphors. They're carefully chosen images that speak to different aspects of our need for security. When you're feeling small and vulnerable, you need the image of wings covering you. When you're feeling under attack, you need the image of a shield. When you feel exposed, you need the fortress. When your home feels threatened, you need the promise about your tent. Each image addresses a different facet of fear, offers comfort to a different wound, and each promise builds on the others, creating a comprehensive picture of divine protection. It's not that God is sometimes a fortress and sometimes a bird. It's that God is large enough, complex enough, sufficient enough to be whatever you need in each moment. The same God who is mighty enough to be your impregnable defense is tender enough to cover you with feathers. The same God who gives you authority to tread on serpents also promises to carry you so you won't stub your foot. Power and tenderness, strength and gentleness, fierce protection and soft comfort all exist simultaneously in divine character. As you lie here tonight, letting these words wash over you, letting sleep slowly approach, consider which image speaks most deeply to your current need. Do you need to imagine yourself under wings right now, hidden, warm, safe? Do you need to picture yourself behind a shield, protected from the arrows flying toward you? Do you need to see yourself lifted up by angels, carried over the rough places? Do you need to stand on solid ground and face what threatens you, knowing you have authority over it? There's no wrong answer. Whatever image brings comfort, whatever promise settles your spirit, that's the one God is offering you right now. The shelter has many rooms. The refuge takes many forms. There's space for exactly what you need. Throughout history, people have turned to this psalm in moments of crisis. Soldiers heading into battle, parents worried about sick children, refugees fleeing danger, people facing persecution, communities enduring plague. Anyone who has ever felt afraid, vulnerable, uncertain about tomorrow. The psalm has crossed cultures, survived translations, remained relevant across vast changes in human civilization, because fear is universal, and so is the need for shelter. Jewish tradition associates this psalm with protection from demons and evil spirits. In medieval times, people would recite it for safety during travels or illness. Christian mystics meditated on it, finding in its verses doorways into deeper encounter with divine presence. Modern trauma therapists sometimes use it as a grounding text, helping people reconnect with a sense of safety when anxiety overwhelms. Its power doesn't diminish with time or cultural change, because the fundamental human needs it addresses don't change. You need to know you're not alone. You need to believe you're protected. You need to trust that someone stronger than you, wiser than you, more powerful than whatever threatens you, has your back. This isn't weakness. This is the basic architecture of how humans are designed to function. We're not meant to face everything alone. We're not built to be self-sufficient fortresses. We're made for relationship, for connection, for interdependence. And at the deepest level, we're made for connection with the one who made us. Your anxiety tonight might be telling you that you're on your own, that everything depends on you, that if you don't figure this out or fix this or control this, disaster will follow. That's the lie anxiety tells. The truth this psalm speaks is different. You're not on your own. Everything doesn't depend on you. You have help. Powerful help, faithful help, help that has been with you all along, even when you couldn't feel it. Think back over your life. Think about times you were certain you wouldn't make it through, situations that seemed impossible, losses that felt unbearable, fears that seemed like they would swallow you whole. And yet here you are, still breathing, still present, still alive. Something carried you through those times. Someone was with you in those troubles. The shelter held, even when you didn't realize you were in it. This isn't about denying the reality of what you've suffered or minimizing the difficulty of what you've endured. It's about recognizing that you've been held all along, that you've been walking under wings, even when the sky seemed empty, that angels have been lifting you over stones, even when you felt like you were stumbling constantly. The protection promised in this psalm isn't theoretical or future. It's active, present, ongoing. It's been functioning in your life whether you recognized it or not. And tonight, as anxiety visits again, as familiar fears knock on familiar doors, the psalm invites you to recognize the shelter consciously, to deliberately position yourself within it, to say with intention, "The Lord is my refuge," and mean it, claim it, rest in it. This is what it means to dwell, to make your home in God's presence. Not to visit occasionally when crisis strikes, but to live there, to return there habitually, to treat it as your true address. Dwelling implies routine, daily return, familiar patterns. You dwell somewhere when you come back to it night after night, when you know its corners and rooms, when it becomes the place from which you go out and to which you return. God invites you to dwell in divine presence the same way, to make it your baseline, your home base, the place you start from each day and return to each night. To let it become so familiar that you recognize it instantly, so comfortable that you relax automatically, so safe that you rest deeply. For many people, this kind of dwelling requires practice. We're conditioned to self-reliance, trained to handle things ourselves, socialized to appear strong and independent. Admitting we need shelter feels like failure. Accepting protection feels like weakness. So we stay outside, exposed to every storm, bearing every burden alone, until we collapse from exhaustion. The psalm offers a different way. It says, dwelling in shelter isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's not giving up. It's accepting the reality of what you need and where it can be found. As sleep continues to approach, as your breathing slows and deepens, as your body finally begins to release the tension it's been carrying, imagine yourself accepting the shelter, not striving for it or earning it or proving you deserve it, just accepting it, the way you'd accept an umbrella in the rain, or a coat in the cold, or a chair when you're tired. Simple acceptance of what's offered because you need it and it's available. The wings spread above you. The fortress walls surround you. The shield is raised. The angels take their positions. The promises activate. Not because you've done anything to trigger them, but because you've stopped resisting them. You've stepped inside. You've come under the wing. You've said, I need this. I receive this. I'm staying here. And from that place, anxiety begins to lose its grip. Not instantly, not magically, but gradually, steadily, surely. Because anxiety thrives in isolation, in the belief that you're facing everything alone. It feeds on the sense that you're unprotected, exposed, vulnerable. But inside the shelter, under the wing, behind the shield, those conditions don't exist. You're not alone. You're not unprotected. You're not facing threats without defense. The psalm doesn't promise that threats disappear. The lion and cobra are still out there. The terror of night and arrow of day still exist. But their power over you changes. They can't reach you in the same way. They can't devastate you as they once might have. Because you're not standing in the open anymore. You're in the shelter. You're under the wing. You're surrounded by faithfulness that functions as shield and rampart. This is what it means to live with anxiety from a different position. Not denying anxiety exists, or pretending you're not afraid, but facing fear from within the safety of divine presence. The fear might still knock. The worry might still visit. The what-ifs might still parade through your mind. But they're outside the shelter, and you're inside it, and that makes all the difference. Let yourself feel that difference tonight. Let your body register safety, even if your mind still chatters with concern. Let your breathing slow, your muscles soften, your jaw unclench, your shoulders drop. These physical releases are prayers in themselves, wordless declarations that you're accepting shelter, receiving protection, trusting the promises that have been spoken over you. The God who stretched wings over you doesn't grow tired of holding them there. The God who commands angels on your behalf doesn't forget or get distracted. The God who promises to be with you in trouble doesn't check out when things get difficult. The God who declares you will not fear doesn't mock your ongoing struggle with fear, but continues speaking truth over you, reminding you who you are and whose you are and where you stand. You stand in the shelter of the Most High. You rest in the shadow of the Almighty. You dwell in a place where refuge and fortress meet, where power and tenderness embrace, where justice and mercy hold hands. You are protected by faithfulness, covered by wings, lifted by angels, given authority over threats, promised rescue and honour and satisfaction and visible salvation. This is your position. This is your reality. This is what's true about you, regardless of what anxiety suggests. And you can return to these truths as often as you need, every night if necessary, every hour if that's what it takes. The shelter doesn't close. The wings don't fold away. The promises don't expire. They're here tomorrow night too, and the night after that, and every night for the rest of your life. This isn't a one-time offer or a limited promotion. This is the permanent state of divine heart toward you. Open arms, spread wings, available shelter, constant protection. So rest now. Let the words of this ancient psalm do their quiet work. Let them settle in your mind like seeds in soil, like stones in a foundation, like warmth in cold spaces. You don't have to memorize them or fully understand them or figure out exactly how they apply to your specific situation. You just have to let them be there, present, speaking, offering what you need most. Shelter, safety, promise, presence. The night is still night, but you're not facing it alone. The darkness is still dark, but light shines within it. Light that darkness cannot overcome. Your anxiety is still real, but so is the shelter. And the shelter is stronger, older, more permanent than any fear you're carrying. The psalm has outlasted empires and plagues and wars and disasters. It's here tonight, still speaking, still offering, still opening its doors to anyone who will enter. You are entering now. With each breath, you're stepping further in. With each moment of release, you're settling more deeply. With each whisper of trust, you're dwelling more fully. The shelter receives you without question. The wing covers you without hesitation. The fortress protects you without condition. You belong here. This is your place. This is where you're meant to be. Especially tonight. Especially when anxiety feels close. Especially when fear threatens to overwhelm. There's a story in the ancient Jewish tradition about Rabbi Akiva, a great scholar who lived in the 1st and 2nd centuries. He was travelling through a strange land one night and sought shelter in a village, but the people turned him away. He had to spend the night in a field with only his donkey, his rooster, and his lamp for company. During the night, a wind came and blew out his lamp. Then a wild animal came and killed his donkey. Then a cat came and killed his rooster. Each time something bad happened, Rabbi Akiva said, "Whatever the merciful one does is for the good." The next morning, he discovered that an army had passed through the village during the night and taken all the inhabitants captive. If he had been given shelter there, he would have been captured too. If his lamp had been burning, the soldiers would have seen it. If his donkey had brayed or his rooster crowed, they would have heard it and found him. Everything that seemed like disaster in the darkness had actually been protection. This story isn't about explaining away suffering or pretending bad things are actually good. It's about recognizing that we see only part of the picture. only this moment, only our limited perspective. We don't see what we're being protected from. We don't see the armies that pass by without noticing us. We don't see the disasters that never touch us. We only see what happens, not what doesn't happen. And we only see now, not what will be revealed later. The psalm invites you into this larger perspective. It asks you to trust that protection is happening even when you can't see it fully, that shelter is functioning even when you feel exposed, that angels are working even when you're not aware of their presence. This isn't blind faith that ignores reality. It's mature faith that acknowledges the limits of what you can see and know in any given moment. Your anxiety tonight might be focused on something specific, a conversation you need to have tomorrow, a test result you're waiting for, a financial situation that feels overwhelming, a relationship that's fracturing, a loss you're grieving, a future that feels terrifyingly uncertain. Whatever it is, it feels enormous right now. It fills your field of vision. It seems like the only thing that matters, the thing that will determine whether you're okay or not okay. But you are more than this one situation. Your life is larger than this single concern. Your identity goes deeper than this particular struggle. And the God who shelters you holds all of it. The thing you're worried about and everything else. The parts you can see and the parts you can't. This moment and all the moments stretching before and behind it. Nothing is outside the shelter. Nothing falls beyond the reach of those wings. This comprehensive protection is hard to accept when anxiety has convinced you that everything depends on one specific outcome. If this thing doesn't work out, anxiety whispers, you'll fall apart. If that person doesn't respond the way you need, you'll be destroyed. If the situation doesn't resolve correctly, you won't survive. Anxiety deals in absolutes, in catastrophes, in worst-case scenarios presented as certainties. It narrows your vision until one thing becomes everything. The psalm widens the lens again. It reminds you that you've been protected through countless situations already, that angels have been lifting you over stones you never saw, that shelter has been functioning while you worried it wasn't there, that you've actually been safe more often than endangered, held more than dropped, carried more than abandoned. The evidence of divine faithfulness is written across your life, even if anxiety keeps you focused only on present fears. Consider the Israelites in the wilderness, leaving Egypt and wandering toward the promised land. Every day they worried about food, about water, about enemies, about whether God had forgotten them. Every day they catastrophized, imagined dying in the desert, wished they'd stayed in slavery where at least they knew what to expect. And every day, manna appeared. Every day, water was provided. Every day, God's presence went with them in cloud and fire. Every day they were sheltered, even as they stood in the open desert. They couldn't see it while it was happening. They couldn't recognize protection in the moment. Only later, looking back, could they say, God was faithful, God provided, God kept his promises. And you're the same. Later, looking back at tonight, at this season, at this struggle, you'll see things you can't see now. You'll recognize protection you're currently unaware of. You'll understand how you were held even when you felt like you were falling. But you don't have to wait for later to trust it. You can choose to believe it now, even in the middle of uncertainty, even while anxiety still speaks its fears. You can say, like Rabbi Akiva, whatever the merciful one does is for the good, even when you can't see the good yet, even when it looks like loss, even when the lamp goes out and the donkey dies and the rooster is silent. This doesn't mean you pretend to feel okay when you don't. It doesn't mean you slap on a fake smile and deny your fear. The psalm never asks you to pretend. It asks you to trust, to acknowledge what you feel while also acknowledging what's true. You can be afraid and sheltered simultaneously. You can feel vulnerable and be protected at the same time. Your emotions are valid, but they're not the whole truth. They're part of your experience, but they don't define your reality. Your reality, according to this psalm, is that you dwell in the shelter of the Most High. That's not a feeling, that's a position. That's a fact about where you are, regardless of what you feel. When you feel afraid, you're a frightened person in a shelter. When you feel vulnerable, you're a vulnerable person under wings. When you feel threatened, you're a threatened person behind a shield. The fear is real, but so is the protection, and the protection is stronger. Think of a child during a thunderstorm. The child is genuinely afraid. The thunder is truly loud. The lightning is actually flashing. The fear is not invalid or irrational. But the child in a parent's arms is safer than the child alone, even though the storm is the same. The parent can't make the storm stop, but the parent can provide presence, can offer shelter, can speak reassurance, can maintain calm when the child cannot. The child's fear is real, and the parent's protection is real, and both exist together. You are that child tonight, and God is the parent who doesn't minimize your fear, but holds you through the storm. The thunder of your anxiety is real. The lightning of your worry flashes genuinely. But you're not alone in it. You're not facing it without someone stronger, wiser, calmer, who can hold steady when you cannot, who can provide shelter when you need it most, who can promise that this storm will pass, and you'll still be here when it does. The psalm promises that you will not fear the terror of night. Not that terror won't exist, not that night won't be dark, but that you won't fear it. Fear is removed, not because circumstances change, but because your position changes, and your position is held, covered, protected, accompanied. Terror might rage outside, but inside the shelter, under the wing, you are safe. That safety doesn't depend on your ability to feel brave. It depends on God's commitment to shelter you. Throughout Scripture, night is often associated with danger, with evil, with things that threaten in darkness. But night is also when God speaks most clearly to some people. Abraham receives the covenant promise under stars. Jacob wrestles with the angel through the night. Moses encounters the burning bush in the wilderness dark. Mary learns she'll bear the Messiah, presumably in the quiet of evening. Night isn't only dangerous, it's also sacred, a time when the noise of day fades and space opens for divine encounter. Perhaps your anxiety-filled nights can become that too. Not immediately, not magically, but gradually. Perhaps instead of fighting wakefulness, or being frustrated by sleeplessness, or being terrified by the racing thoughts, you can begin to see these night hours as invitations. Not invitations to worry, but invitations to turn toward the shelter, to consciously position yourself under the wing, to practice dwelling rather than striving. This doesn't mean anxiety is good, or that God causes your sleeplessness to teach you something. It means that even anxiety-filled nights can become places of encounter if you bring them into the shelter rather than trying to handle them alone. The psalm says, "You will not fear the terror of night." And that promise can begin to be experienced when you stop fighting night and start meeting God in it. What if, instead of lying here thinking, "Should be asleep. Why can't I sleep? What's wrong with me? I'm going to be exhausted tomorrow," you simply said, "Here I am, awake in the night, anxious and afraid, and I'm coming under the wing." What if you let these words from the psalm be your companions, rather than your racing thoughts? What if you imagined yourself literally covered by feathers, warm, protected, safe enough to finally rest? The imagination is a powerful tool that anxiety hijacks constantly, filling your mind with worst-case scenarios, with catastrophic outcomes, with vivid pictures of everything that could go wrong. But imagination can also be reclaimed, used differently, directed toward truth instead of fear. You can imagine yourself in the shelter. You can picture wings spreading over you. You can visualize the fortress walls, solid and high. You can see angels taking their positions. This isn't make-believe. It's choosing which images to hold in your mind, which pictures to dwell on. Ancient Christians practiced something called lectio divina, divine reading, where they would take a passage of scripture and read it slowly, meditatively, repeatedly, letting it sink deep into their consciousness. They would picture themselves inside the story, imagine the scene, feel the truth of it in their bodies, not just their minds. This wasn't intellectual study, it was immersive encounter, using imagination in service of faith rather than fear. You can do this with Psalm 91 tonight. As you hear these words again and again, let yourself be inside them. Feel the shelter surrounding you. Sense the wing covering you. Notice the faithfulness functioning as your shield. Observe the angels lifting you. Experience the authority you have over threats. Receive the promise of God's presence in your trouble. Let it become more than words. Let it become environment, atmosphere, reality you inhabit. This isn't about convincing yourself of something that isn't true. It's about recognizing what's actually true, but hidden from your anxious vision. The shelter exists whether you picture it or not, but picturing it helps you experience what's already real. The protection functions whether you feel it or not, but feeling it helps you rest in what's already operating. The promises stand whether you claim them or not, but claiming them helps you live from them rather than from fear. And if you try this and it feels like nothing's happening, if you still feel anxious and afraid and unable to rest, that's okay too. The shelter doesn't depend on your ability to feel its presence. It holds you whether you feel held or not. The promises remain true whether you experience them emotionally or not. Your inability to sense something doesn't make it less real. A child held by a parent in deep sleep doesn't feel the holding, but the holding still happens, still protects, still matters. So even if you listen to these words and feel nothing, even if anxiety maintains its grip and sleep remains elusive and peace feels impossible, you are still sheltered. You are still covered. You are still protected. Your feelings are not the measure of God's faithfulness. Your emotions are not the gauge of divine presence. What's true is true whether you sense it or not. And what's true according to this psalm is that you dwell in shelter. You rest in shadow. You are accompanied by angels. You are promised deliverance. Let's return to the specific promises once more, letting them wash over you like waves, like rain, like oil, like any healing thing that covers and soaks in and does its work whether you fully understand how or not. Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. You are dwelling, even now, even here, even anxious and awake. This is dwelling. This act of turning toward God, of listening to these words, of seeking comfort and truth. This is dwelling. You're already doing it. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. Say it now, even silently, even hesitantly. Say, you are my refuge. And let that declaration stand, even if doubt immediately follows. Say, you are my fortress, even if you feel exposed. Say, you are my God, even if you feel distant from God. Say, I trust you, even if trust feels impossible. The saying itself is an act of faith, a step toward the shelter, a movement under the wing. Surely He will save you from the fowler's snare and from the deadly pestilence. Whatever trap threatens to catch you, whatever disease of mind or body or spirit attacks you, God will save. Not might save, not could save, but will save. The Hebrew word carries certainty, divine commitment, sure promise. This isn't wishful thinking. This is God's own word about God's own intention toward you. Saving is what God does. Deliverance is God's nature. Protection is not reluctant or grudging. It's foundational to divine character. He will cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you will find refuge. Feel those wings now, even if only in imagination. Feel the warmth, the softness, the security of being covered by something larger and stronger than yourself. You are small beneath those wings, but small in the way a chick is small, not diminished but protected, not weak but sheltered. Your smallness isn't shameful. It's exactly right for this moment. You're the perfect size to fit under the wing. His faithfulness will be your shield and rampart. The faithfulness isn't yours. You don't have to generate it or maintain it or prove it. It's His faithfulness, God's faithfulness, and it functions as your protection. On days when your own faith wavers, when trust feels impossible, when belief seems out of reach, God's faithfulness remains. It's not contingent on your strength. It exists independent of your ability to feel it. It is your shield whether you're holding it confidently or whether it's simply there, protecting you even when you're not aware of it. You will not fear the terror of night, nor the arrow that flies by day. The terror is acknowledged. The arrows are real. But you will not fear them, not because they're not dangerous, but because you're protected from them. They exist outside the shelter. They fly in spaces you're not occupying. They target vulnerability you no longer have because you're covered, shielded, defended. The terror has no access to you in the shelter. The arrows can't reach you under the wing, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the plague that destroys at midday. Morning and night, day and darkness, every hour carries potential threat in a fallen world. But every hour also carries divine protection. Whatever stalks you, whatever seeks to destroy you, encounters God's barrier before it encounters you. You're not the first line of defense. You're not standing alone against what threatens. You're behind the shield, under the wing, within the fortress. And anything that wants to reach you has to go through divine protection first. 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. This is the hardest promise for many people, the one that seems to contradict lived experience, because we know people who fell. We know faithful people who suffered. We know beloved ones who died despite prayers, despite faith, despite everything. How do we hold this promise honestly, without either dismissing it as naive or turning it into a cruel guarantee that clearly doesn't always hold true? Perhaps the key is understanding what "come near you" truly means in the deepest sense. In Jewish mysticism, there's a concept of the neshama, the highest part of the soul, the piece of you that remains eternally connected to God, regardless of what happens to your body or mind. This is the part that cannot be touched by destruction, that remains pure even when everything else is damaged, that survives even death itself. When the psalm says, "It will not come near you," perhaps it's speaking to this deepest part, promising that your essential self, your eternal soul, your truest identity, remains protected even when circumstances devastate. This doesn't minimize suffering. It doesn't explain away pain. It doesn't make loss acceptable or justify tragedy. But it does suggest that even in the worst moments, even when you feel like you're falling, even when destruction seems complete, there's a part of you that remains untouched, held, safe in God's hands. The body may be wounded, but the soul is whole. The circumstances may be terrible, but your identity as God's beloved child remains secure. The external may be chaos, but the internal shelter still stands. Paul writes about this in his letter to the Romans. He asks, what can separate us from the love of Christ? And then lists everything terrible: tribulation, distress, persecution, famine, nakedness, danger, sword. He acknowledges that these things happen, that faithful people face them, and then he declares that none of them can separate us from God's love. Not because they're not painful, not because they don't hurt, but because God's love is a deeper reality than any circumstances we face. This is what it means that destruction will not come near you. It might come near your body, near your circumstances, near your comfort, near your plans, but it cannot come near your soul, cannot touch your identity in Christ, cannot reach the part of you that dwells in the shelter. That part remains safe, regardless of what happens in the visible world. That part is held, regardless of what falls around you. That part cannot be destroyed, because it's already eternal, already secure, already home in God. You will only observe with your eyes and see the punishment of the wicked. Again, this troubling phrase. But perhaps it's simply acknowledging that from within the shelter, you see things differently. You watch consequences unfold. You observe cause and effect. You witness what happens when people reject protection and insist on facing everything alone. Not with judgment or satisfaction, but with understanding. You see clearly because you're no longer consumed by what you're seeing. You can observe without being destroyed by what you observe. This is actually a profound gift of the shelter. When you're protected, when you're stable, when you're grounded in God's promises, you can look at difficult realities without being overwhelmed by them. You can acknowledge suffering without being drowned by it. You can witness injustice without being crushed by despair. You can see clearly because you're standing on solid ground. The shelter doesn't blind you to reality. It gives you a place to stand while you look at reality honestly. If you say, "The Lord is my refuge," and you make the Most High your dwelling, no harm will overtake you. No disaster will come near your tent. This is the conditional statement, the invitation repeated. If you say, if you make. These are choices, ongoing choices, not one-time decisions. Every day you can choose to say, "The Lord is my refuge." Every night you can choose to dwell in God's presence rather than dwelling in worry. Every moment you can choose to return to the shelter rather than standing outside trying to manage everything alone. And the promise that follows is comprehensive. No harm will overtake you. Not no difficulty, but no harm, suggesting that even difficulties that come won't ultimately harm what matters most. No disaster will come near your tent, your sacred space, your inner sanctum. The dwelling place of your soul remains protected, even when external circumstances crumble. This is the paradox of Christian faith, that you can lose everything and still have what matters most. That you can be stripped of all security and still be secure. That you can face death and still truly live. For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. All your ways, not just the good ones, not just when you're being faithful or strong or brave. All your ways includes the wandering ways, the confused ways, the anxious ways, the doubting ways. It includes tonight, lying here afraid. It includes tomorrow when you wake up still carrying concerns. It includes the path you wish you weren't walking and the road you never wanted to travel. Angels are commanded concerning all of it, guarding you even in the ways you'd rather not be going. This is grace. This is love that doesn't wait for you to get it right before offering protection. This is faithfulness that functions even when your own faith falters. The angels don't abandon you because you're struggling. They don't withdraw because you're afraid. They're commanded concerning you, and they follow that command regardless of your state, your mood, your strength, or weakness. You don't earn angelic protection. You receive it because God commands it, because God loves you, because guarding you is part of divine commitment to you. They will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. Even the small things matter, even the minor injuries, the daily frustrations, the tiny setbacks. Angels lift you over stones, not just mountains, not just major obstacles, but ordinary stones in the path. God cares about your foot, about your comfort, about the small pains that add up over time. Nothing is too insignificant for divine concern. Nothing is beneath God's notice. If God cares about your foot striking a stone, then God certainly cares about your anxiety tonight. God cares about the worry keeping you awake, the fear making your chest tight, the racing thoughts stealing your peace. God cares about the small things because to you, they're not small. They're your life. They're what you're experiencing right now. And you matter to God. Not in some abstract theological way, but in the specific, particular, immediate way of a parent concerned about their child's stubbed toe. You will tread on the lion and the cobra. You will trample the great lion and the serpent. Back to the fierce imagery, the promise of authority. But notice it comes after the promise about angels lifting you over stones. First tenderness, then power. First you're carried, then you're empowered. First you receive protection, then you exercise authority. The order matters. You don't start by trying to be strong enough to fight lions. You start by accepting that you need to be carried. And from that place of being carried, from that experience of protection, courage grows. The authority you have over threats isn't your own. It's delegated authority, borrowed power, strength that comes from being connected to the source of all strength. When you tread on the lion, you do so not in your own might, but in the might of the one who shelters you. This is why you must stay in the shelter. Outside it, trying to face threats alone, you're vulnerable. Inside it, drawing on divine power, have authority even over things that would normally destroy you. Your anxiety is one of those things. It's lion-like in its power to paralyze, cobra-like in its ability to poison your thoughts with venom. And the psalm says, you have authority over it. Not that you won't feel it, not that it won't visit, but that it doesn't have ultimate power over you. You can tread on it, you can trample it, you can refuse to let it rule your life. Not in your strength, but in the strength that's available to you because you dwell in the shelter. Now the psalm shifts again, and God speaks directly, personally, intimately. Because he loves me, says the Lord, I will rescue him. This is the foundation of everything. Not your perfection, not your faith level, not your good behavior. Your love. Simple, imperfect, faltering as it might be, your love for God triggers divine response. I will rescue. Not might, not maybe, but will. This is certainty, divine commitment, unbreakable promise. You might feel like your love for God is weak right now, inadequate, barely there. You might wonder if you love God at all, when fear feels so much stronger than faith, when anxiety seems more real than peace, when doubt whispers louder than trust. But love isn't measured by feelings. Love is measured by direction, by the orientation of your heart, by where you turn when you're afraid. And you're turning to God right now. You're listening to these words. You're seeking shelter. That's love. That's enough. That triggers the I will rescue. I will protect him, for he acknowledges my name. To acknowledge God's name is to recognize who God is, to call upon divine character, to align yourself with divine nature. Every time you say, God, I need help, you're acknowledging the name. Every time you whisper, I trust you, even uncertainly, you're acknowledging the name. Every time you turn toward the shelter instead of trying to handle everything alone, you're acknowledging the name. It doesn't require theological sophistication or perfect understanding. It just requires turning, seeking, calling. He will call on me, and I will answer him. This promise echoes throughout Scripture. Call, and I will answer. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened. Ask, and you will receive. The pattern is consistent. God responds to those who call. Not because God is distant and needs to be summoned, but because calling is the human side of relationship, the part you play, the way you open yourself to receive what God wants to give. Have you called tonight? Even silently? Even just by being here, by listening, by letting these words speak to your fear? That's calling. That's enough. And the answer is already coming. Not always the answer you expect or want, not always immediately visible, but coming nonetheless. God's answer to your anxious call is presence, is I will be with him in trouble, is the shelter that already surrounds you even as you call. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With him in trouble. This is the heart of incarnation, of God with us, of Emmanuel. God doesn't promise to keep you from trouble, but to be with you in it, to inhabit it with you, to share the space of your difficulty. And from within that shared space, deliverance comes. Not escape from the trouble necessarily, but transformation within it, power to endure it, grace sufficient for it, eventual emergence from it. And honour. You will be honoured. Your struggle matters. Your endurance counts. Your faith in the midst of fear is seen and valued. The honor doesn't come from never struggling. It comes from continuing to call, continuing to seek shelter, continuing to love even when love is difficult. This is what God honors. Not perfection, but faithfulness. Not strength, but persistence. Not feeling brave, but choosing trust despite fear. With long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. Satisfaction, that deep soul contentment that comes not from circumstances being perfect, but from needs being met, from being filled with what truly nourishes. God promises satisfaction, not because life will be easy, but because divine presence satisfies in ways nothing else can. Bread satisfies physical hunger. Water satisfies thirst. God's presence satisfies the soul's deepest longings. And salvation, that ultimate deliverance, that final rescue, that complete restoration. God promises to show you salvation, to make it visible, to demonstrate it in ways you can see and experience. Not just tell you about it, not just promise it for later, but show it now, reveal it in present moments, make it tangible in your actual life. Salvation is breaking into the world moment by moment, and God promises you'll see it, you'll recognize it, you'll experience it. As this meditation comes to a close, as these words settle into the quiet spaces of your mind, as sleep finally begins to claim you, receive these final reminders. You are not alone. You have never been alone. Even in your deepest anxiety, even in your darkest fear, even in your most painful uncertainty, the shelter has held you. The wing has covered you. The angels have lifted you. The promises have stood. Tomorrow, when you wake, the shelter will still be there. Your anxieties might return with the morning light. Your worries might crowd back in with consciousness. But the shelter doesn't depend on your emotional state. It stands independent of your feelings. It existed before you were born and will exist after you die. It's as permanent as God Himself, because it is God Himself, surrounding you, holding you, keeping you. You can return to this psalm whenever you need it. Tonight, tomorrow night, every night. You can return to these promises, these images, these truths. They don't wear out, they don't expire, they don't become less true through repetition. They're here for you, constant and available, like the shelter itself, like the wings themselves, like the faithfulness that functions as shield and rampart, regardless of how many times you need to be reminded. And perhaps over time, as you return here night after night, as these words become familiar friends, as this practice of dwelling becomes habitual, you'll notice something changing. Not that anxiety disappears completely, not that fear never visits, but that they have less power, that you know where to go when they come, that you have words to speak back to them, promises to stand on, images to hold in your mind that counter the catastrophic scenarios anxiety paints. You'll notice that you're developing a reflex, an automatic response to fear that isn't panic but turning, a movement towards shelter that becomes as natural as breathing. When anxiety rises, you'll find yourself almost unconsciously reaching for these truths, positioning yourself under these wings, claiming these promises. Not because you've worked hard to memorize them, but because they've worked their way deep into your consciousness, through repetitive hearing, through nightly return, through practiced dwelling. This is what it means to make the Most High your dwelling, not to visit occasionally when crisis strikes, but to live there, to know the way home so well that you can find it in the dark, to be so familiar with the shelter that returning to it becomes instinctive, like a child who runs to a parent without thinking when afraid. You'll run to the shelter. Like a bird that flies to its nest when storms approach, you'll fly under the wing. And in that place, in that practiced dwelling, anxiety loses its ultimate power. It can still visit, it can still speak, but it no longer rules, because you have a stronger word, a truer promise, a safer place. You have the shelter of the Most High. You have the shadow of the Almighty. You have angels commanded concerning you. You have God's own voice declaring, "I will rescue, I will protect, I will be with him in trouble." So rest now, finally, fully. Let your body release the tension it's been holding. Let your mind slow its racing. Let your breath deepen and steady. Let sleep come gently, naturally, without force or striving. You've done what you needed to do tonight. You've turned toward the shelter. You've listened to the promises. You've positioned yourself under the wing. That's enough. That's everything. The shelter surrounds you as you drift towards sleep. The wing covers you as your eyes close. The promises stand over you as consciousness fades. Angels take their positions for the night watch. God keeps vigil when you cannot. Protection functions while you rest. The faithfulness that is your shield doesn't sleep when you do. It remains, constant and sure, guarding you through the dark hours. And in the morning, when light returns and you wake to face another day, the shelter will still be there. Not because you maintained it through perfect faith, not because you earned it through faultless trust, but because God is. Faithful even when you're not, because divine love doesn't waver even when human love falters. Because the promises stand independent of your ability to claim them perfectly. You are held, tonight and always. You are protected, in this moment and every moment. You are loved, now and forever. These truths don't change with your circumstances or your emotional state. They're bedrock, foundation, the ground beneath the ground, the reality supporting all other realities. Build your life on them. Return to them daily. Dwell in them perpetually. Let this be your testimony, your declaration, your truth spoken into darkness. I dwell in the shelter of the Most High. I rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. Say it now, even silently. Say it tomorrow. Say it whenever anxiety visits. Say it until it becomes true, not just theologically, but experientially, until you feel it in your bones, until it settles in your soul like a stone settling into deep water, sinking down to where it belongs, where it's always belonged, where it will remain. You belong in the shelter. This is your home. This is where you're meant to be. Not as a visitor, not as a guest, but as a beloved child returning to a parent's embrace, as a tired traveller arriving at journey's end, as one who has wandered and now comes back to the place prepared specifically for them. The shelter doesn't just protect you, it welcomes you. The wing doesn't just cover you, it gathers you. The promises don't just speak to you, they speak over you, declaring your identity, affirming your worth, establishing your security. So sleep now, dear one. Sleep knowing you're not alone. Sleep feeling the wings above you. Sleep hearing the promises speaking. Sleep experiencing the shelter surrounding you. Sleep as a child sleeps in safety, as a bird sleeps in its nest, as one who trusts sleeps in the arms of one who is trustworthy. Sleep deeply. Sleep peacefully. Sleep held by love that never lets go. Tomorrow will come with its own concerns. Tomorrow's anxiety can be faced tomorrow. Tonight, this moment, is for rest, for release, for receiving what you cannot provide for yourself, for letting God be God while you simply be loved, be sheltered, be at peace. The burden you've been carrying, you can set it down now. The worry you've been holding, you can release it now. The fear you've been fighting, you can surrender it now. Not because you're giving up, but because you're giving over. You're handing to God what was never yours to carry alone. You're entrusting to divine care what human care cannot adequately hold. You're accepting that you need a shelter you didn't build, a strength you don't possess, a faithfulness you can't generate. And in that acceptance, in that surrender, in that release, you find what you've been seeking all along. Rest, peace, safety, home. The psalm ends where it began, with dwelling and rest, but now enriched by everything in between. Now you know what the shelter contains. Now you've heard the promises that fill it. Now you've received the invitation to remain there, not just tonight, but always. This is your place. These are your promises. This is your God, faithful and true, strong and tender, mighty and gentle, your refuge and fortress, your shelter and wing, your protector and deliverer. Sleep now in that truth. Sleep wrapped in those promises. Sleep covered by those wings. Sleep held by that love. Tomorrow you'll wake still held, still covered, still promised, still loved. But tonight, simply rest, simply receive, simply be. The shelter holds you, the promises stand, the wings spread. God keeps watch. And you, beloved, anxious, tired, seeking child of God, you can finally, truly, deeply rest. Good night.